Madam President, I come to the floor today to denounce the Majority Leader's sham debate on the Green New Deal. Let's be clear. The Majority Leader did not call this resolution up for a vote because he thinks climate change is an urgent threat to our country. In fact, he has opposed nearly every congressional effort to confront the climate crisis. The Republican Party's political and financial ties to the fossil fuel industry are well known. This latest effort to attack senators demanding action on climate change with cries of socialism is reminiscent of the Red Scare, in my view. Give me a break. The Green New Deal is an aspirational plan to combat climate change, create high-paying jobs, and develop a more sustainable economy that allows communities, families, and individuals to thrive. This isn't radical. This isn't socialism. This is basic common sense. The truly radical position is the Majority Leader's insistence that we stick our heads in the sand, follow the lead of the corporate-backed interests funding Republican campaigns, and do nothing to tackle climate change. The status quo might benefit the Majority Leader, the Republican Party, and their allies in the fossil fuel industry, but it's deeply dangerous for our country. Climate change is already impacting our lives and damaging our economy. Annual weather-related natural disasters have more than tripled worldwide since the 1960s. When scientists at the Mauna Loa Observatory on the Big Island of Hawaii first confirmed that carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere were steadily rising due to the burning of fossil fuels. According to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, the United States has sustained 139 weather and climate disasters, beginning with Hurricane Katrina in 2005, where damages exceeded $1 billion. The total cost of these 139 disasters, nearly $1.1 trillion. Last year, in 2018, the United States experienced the fourth highest number of weather disasters in our history at the tremendous cost of 247 lives lost and $91 billion in damages. In Hawaii, last year we registered record-breaking flooding on Kauai and Oahu that resulted in more than $125 million in damages. That storm generated the largest 24-hour rainfall accumulation in American history at nearly 50 inches on Kauai's North Shore in a very short period of rainfall time. Residents of the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands also felt the devastating impact of Typhoon Yutu, the worst storm to hit any part of the United States since 1935. It certainly isn't a coincidence that 2018 was also the fourth hottest year on record, surpassed only by 2016, 2015, and 2017. And we've already seen the devastating cost of climate-driven disasters in the first 3 months of 2019. 11 days ago, Tropical Cyclone Idai devastated Mozambique, Zimbabwe, and Malawi, killing hundreds of people. It is already being called one of the worst weather-related disasters ever in the Southern Hemisphere. Closer to home, the Missouri River has already set record levels of flooding in Nebraska, Iowa, and South Dakota. Under current estimates, this historic flooding in the Midwest will cost at least $3 billion in damages to roads, farms, homes, and businesses. According to Texas A&M University climate scientist Andrew Dessler, climate change is exacerbating the flooding, saying, quote, "You can think of climate change as steroids for these rain events," end quote. And more is on the way. According to the Spring Weather Outlook, NOAA released last Thursday, more than 200 million Americans are at risk for some kind of flooding, with 13 million of them at risk of major inundation. Given the increasing intensity and frequency of severe weather events, many more states and communities will need disaster relief, something we're about to vote on later this week. And that's something we cannot and should not play politics with, disaster relief. Every community impacted by natural disasters should receive assistance in the upcoming supplemental appropriations bill, including Puerto Rico, the Northern Mariana Islands, and other trust territories. While these extreme weather events will continue to impact local communities and the American economy, climate change also threatens our national security. Like a large majority of the American people, senior national security officials and Department of Defense officials understand we can't just follow the majority leader's example and stick our heads in the sand to avoid the painful truth of climate change. In 2017, for example, then Secretary of Defense James Mattis told the Senate Armed Services Committee that, and I quote, "Climate change is impacting stability in areas of the world where our troops are operating." He also stated that climate change is a challenge that requires a broader whole-of-government response, end quote. In February, Director of National Intelligence Dan Coats issued a new worldwide threat assessment that concluded that climate hazards like extreme weather, wildfires, droughts, and acidifying oceans are, quote, threatening infrastructure, health, and water and food security, end quote, around the world. This means there will be more threats to our national security in an increasingly unstable world environment. Faced with a global problem that threatens our national security, President Trump, with support of the Republicans in Congress, announced he would withdraw the United States from the Paris Climate Accord. He has, in effect, advocated America's global leadership role in the climate crisis, alienated our allies, and created new opportunities for near-peer competitors like China. At the same time as the United States embraced climate denial on the international stage under Donald Trump, China has stepped up to fill the diplomatic void. After the latest round of international climate talks in November, Canada's Environmental Minister Catherine McKenna said, quote, "When the U.S. stepped back, China decided to step up. The role China plays around the negotiating table can't be underestimated," end quote. In addition to its diplomatic efforts, China has made significant policy changes to reduce its coal use from its 2013 peak and to scale up low-carbon alternatives. China is now the world's leading producer, exporter, and installer of solar panels, wind turbines, batteries, and electric vehicles. China isn't the only country on the global stage acknowledging the reality of climate change and taking steps to combat it. German Chancellor Angela Merkel, for example, has said, quote, "Climate change is a matter of both ecological necessity and economic rationality," end quote. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has said that, quote, "The effects of climate change are everywhere, and they are a constant reminder of the need to act now. While climate change is the biggest challenge of this generation, it also provides the opportunity to do better while growing the economy," end quote. Under the previous 2 years of their unified control of the White House and Congress, Republicans have repeatedly blocked any efforts to combat climate change. With Democrats now in control in the House, I'm looking forward to working with like-minded colleagues to demonstrate there are those of us ready and willing to act. Today, I'm joining Representative Barbara Lee of California to introduce the Women and Climate Change Act of 2019. This bill recognizes that while the negative impacts of climate change often impact women the most, they too often don't have a seat at the table when it comes to developing policy. Our bill creates a federal interagency working group that will collect data and develop policies and strategies to address the effects of climate change on women, both at home and abroad. We need to empower women to tackle climate change. They need seats at the table. So long as Donald Trump and his Republican allies in Congress obstruct meaningful debate and action, states and local communities are taking their own decisive steps to combat climate change. Almost every state in the country has begun to experience the impacts of climate change. But as an island state, Hawaii is poised to experience some of the harshest consequences of climate change. Rising sea levels, combined with increased storm runoff, will increase coastal flooding and erosion, damaging sensitive ecosystems, infrastructure, and agriculture. According to research from the University of Hawaii Sea Grant Program, 70% of beaches in Hawaii are eroding, and 13 miles of public beaches that once were present no longer exist. Waikiki Beach alone generates $2.3 billion of Hawaii's economy every year and could be completely submerged by the end of the century. A warming ocean will increase bleaching and disease outbreaks on coral reefs, which currently support $360 million in economic activity each year. For Hawaii, a sea level rise of 3.2 feet, which could happen as early as 2060, will result in $20 billion in damage, the chronic flooding of 38 miles of major roads, 25,000 acres of land, and 6,500 structures rendered unusable or lost, and 20,000 residents displaced. The prospect of such widespread climate change-driven devastation has spurred the state of Hawaii to action. We have made a commitment to become carbon neutral and generate 100% of our electricity from renewable energy sources by 2045. And we became the first state to separately ratify the Paris Climate Agreement. 18 states and Puerto Rico have since followed suit. In addition to efforts at the state level, local communities, families, and landowners are taking their own steps to cope with the threat of climate change and adapt as necessary. Last week, I met with National Park Service officials, members of the National Alakahakai Trail Association, local government representatives, non-government organizations, and community partners, including Native Hawaiian lineal descendants, to learn how they are implementing what they are doing to lead community-based approaches to trail management and how the issue of climate change is threatening national treasures on our coasts in Hawaii. During my visit, members of the Kailapa Community Association created a plan to cope with decreased rainfall, coastal erosion, and other impacts on the ahupua'a, or division of land, that they've lived on for more than 12 generations. Families and communities in Hawaii understand the threat of climate change and are demanding we take decisive action to combat it. Donald Trump and Republicans in Congress should muster the political courage to do the same. But that is not happening anytime soon, quite the contrary. Instead, like so many ideas they oppose, Republicans have resorted to mocking and distorting what the Green New Deal does. They're doing it by their tried and true method, by scaring people. Donald Trump and the majority leader have invested a lot of time in attempting to justify their claim that the Green New Deal is going to ban air travel. What?
The senator's time has expired.
Let me conclude by saying that the Green New Deal is aspirational. To say that it's going to result in everyone stopping meat eating, it's like, what the heck? These are so-called facts that the opponents and the climate change deniers are saying about the Green New Deal is laughable, coming from the very people who deny the scientific fact of climate change. So I could go on, but obviously my time is up. We'll have more to say as we continue this so-called sham debate. But let's not continue to stick our heads in the sand. And because I'm going to need to, and I would like to submit for the record some remarks, that a letter written by an 11-year-old girl in Hawaii who spoke at a climate change rally in Hawaii, and she was so articulate, and she said, this is like experiencing World War III for the young people. They demand the adults in the Senate to do something about it and save
senator's time has expired.
And address climate change in an appropriate way. Thank you.